Welcome to the Just Ask podcast. My name is Becky Bridgham.
And I'm Jim Bridgham.
And we decided to create a podcast where we would answer the questions from our friends and listeners. So you can pretty much ask us anything and we will do our best to answer them. So our question today is, do you have any tips for traveling on a budget? Now, we've mentioned in the podcast before that we are both huge Dave Ramsey proponents. We took Financial Peace University course probably about 15 years ago. We're debt-free besides our house. We live on a budget, but budgeting will often sound restrictive, but it's actually very freeing because when you know where your money's going, you know where your money's going. And so you can direct it for the fun things too. So we are huge advocates of budgeting in all areas of your life to give you freedom to, buy that new pair of shoes, or freedom to buy a brand new car with cash, and freedom to take awesome vacations. But part of that is budgeting for your vacations. So one of our things is that we put away money every month that go toward our vacation. So when that time comes, we have the money set aside. But the reality is you still only have so much money set aside. So we will do our best to share some of our tips for when you have a set amount for a vacation, how do you maximize that?
Perfect. So I'll start with a story. We'd been living in Turkey and we were using the Dave Ramsey plan. So we had like envelopes of lira, which was the money used at the time. And we're in Istanbul. And I remember we're about to come back to where we lived and we're walking through vendors just looking. And I remember this gentleman came up to us and he's selling bowls in his shop. So we look through his shop and we go, oh, this is beautiful. And he has this set that's unbelievably expensive. I forget what it was. But I said, oh, these are beautiful, but we don't have that much money. We only have 80 lira left. And he thinks I'm negotiating. And he's like, well, no, I can't do that. I said, well, that's fine because I only have 80 lira. I don't really want the bowls. So we have this kind of discussion. They're pretty. And we're just walking around.
The reality is I really wanted the bowls. And I'll interject in one area. A lot of Turkish bowls are blue and white and orange and yellow. Well, these were red. And our kitchen, since as long as we have been married, has been red and cream, browns, those colors. And so I really wanted these bowls. So Jim has really, he wants to make me happy, but kind of no attachment to the red bowls and only $80 lira in his pocket. So this guy...
So we're walking around this area and the guy comes out, he goes, okay, will you do like 100 lira? And I said, man, I have 80 total lira left. Like that's all I've got. It's totally okay. I don't need to get the bowls. And again, in the Middle Eastern context, I'm realizing like I am completely negotiating, but unintentionally.
Right.
So I had zero attachment to the bowls. Becky loved them. I had 80 lira and we're walking. This guy's like sweating and smoking cigarettes. Like it's like he's worried about the situation. So we keep walking around. And for context, in this area of Istanbul is pretty condensed and there's multiple shops. He comes and gets us. He goes, I will do it for 85 lira. And I'm like, I have 80 lira. And I had like some change in my pocket. And I remember saying, like, I can do this. And he's like, fine. You make hardest bargain ever. And anyway, so we ended up with these bowls, which we still
have in our kitchen.
Yeah.
I mean, this is before when Josh was a baby, so probably 14 years we've been using these same bowls.
No, it was before he was born. I think it was 15 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, we ended up with these bowls negotiating because we were on a budget. And what we're really saying with this, I'm not saying you need to walk around a foreign country with cash in your pocket, but it's setting aside the amount of money you want to spend on a trip. And I found that like by doing that, you can actually have a much better experience because the things you get are kind of limited. Whereas if you go out with a credit card and you go to like a Disney and you're like, well, I'll just spoil the kids. Frankly, if you have a budget, you get to choose what you really want. And there's a better sense of pleasure or enjoyment to it. And as I say in every podcast, I swear life is around two real principles, pain and pleasure. We want to escape pain and seek pleasure. That is really the human experience in a nutshell. And in this case, when you have a finite resource and you say, well, what can I get with it? Your brain releases the endorphins when you spend it on what you really want. So you can have a pretty superior and amazing experience by limiting your resources. This actually also applies to choices in general. If you go into a restaurant where there's a million choices, it's completely overwhelming. But if you go in and there's a few choices like A and B or B and C, you actually will feel more confident in your decision. An example might be like an In-N-Out burger. If you go in, there's very few choices on the menu. You go in, you can choose this and this. And of course, they have the hidden menu. You can go Google that after. Love the hidden menu. But many other places like a McDonald's or Burger King, to stay in the fast food lane, have so many choices that their screens are now digital and moving. And it can be overwhelming if you don't go there all the time. I know, to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, there are so many choices. So limiting your choices in any environment is actually a positive thing for your psyche and your experience.
So I love the idea of having money set aside for specific things. So one of the ways that we really save, we're a family of 5. And so it gets expensive when you are traveling. We might need 2 hotel rooms. You're eating 5, and we have, 2 teenagers now, almost 1 preteen. And they eat like adults. So 5 adults or 4 adults and 1 child eating out for 3 meals a day, it can really add up. So some of our big tips for saving money or making that budget go further is, 1, we are completely loyal to the Marriott brand of hotels. Jim had to travel a ton for work. I know he shared in other podcasts where he was gone more than he was home in some years of life. And so we would rack up all those hotel points by staying at one specific property. And so we would often, when we would do staycations or even when we went to Disney, we would use those points to maximize our hotel stay. We often will stay at Residence Inns, which is part of the Marriott brand, but they're set up like little apartments. And so we can, instead of having to get 2 hotel rooms, we can get 1 hotel room with 2 bedrooms. There's a couch in the middle with a TV and a little kitchenette. And so that one allows us to only get 1 room, but then we have a kitchen. And so part of maximizing the budget is that hotel chain also has free breakfast. So that's 1 meal a day that you don't have to spend money on. So people might, laugh at us and like, oh, I'm going to stay at the high end. Well, go ahead and spend $22 a person on breakfast. Like, we're getting ours for free and it's delicious. And it also helps us stay within our healthy eating window and our calorie budget, because there's good, healthy choices. You're not driving through McDonald's spending $50 on food that's going to kind of, not agree with you later. So 1, finding a hotel chain that you're loyal to so you can rack up your points, making good choices as far as like finding hotels that have free breakfast, or a lot of the Marriott chains will have free happy hour and wine on certain nights of the week. Those are awesome too, help us maximize and stretch the budget. And then also, when you're eating out as a family, making good choices as far as what's going to fill your family up that is healthy and smart, plus bringing food with you. So I know a lot of people they'll travel and they use travel as a occasion to explore new restaurants and try new food, which is totally awesome. My one friend, she travels a lot for work. Every time she goes somewhere new, she wants to find a new restaurant, which I admire. I think that's awesome. But I wouldn't want to do that for 3 meals a day. So packing your own snacks when you're traveling, finding healthy options in the airport, maximizing your budget so that when you have more money to do fun excursions or try new places or have those really special experiences, because after a while, eating out kind of gets old when you're doing it too often. And so our family knows that when we eat out, it's special, it's set apart, and I think they really appreciate it and enjoy it more. But we go into our travel with a plan, with snacks in our carry-ons and a plan for what we're going to eat and where we're going to go. And it makes the experience more enjoyable because you're not stressed out about money in the middle of your trips.
Yeah, and I'd also say it's making the choice in advance. So I'll use Disney because many people have been to Disney and will go back again once this whole craziness ends. That when you go to Disney, there are definitely meal plans, which are certainly an option, but many times it's just buying 1 to 2 meals a day at the park and bringing things with you. But making the choice in advance helps you, because there's a lot of temptations when you go. Even like our local zoo has little stops along the way where you can buy ice cream and this and so forth. It's okay to have a treat and say, hey, every other day, we're going to be able to get an ice cream. But if not, if you just go in and say, hey, whatever happens, happens, that's a great free spirit approach. But that free spirit approach could really tax your credit card, because if you go in and say like, okay, well, they want ice cream, we'll get ice cream. Okay, well, we'll go for hot dogs. Well, I know like a hot dog at Disney, I remember the one we went to, was it like $20 a hot dog or something?
And the hot dogs were literally like 2 feet long, which had we planned ahead, we could have split that among 3 children.
Yeah, we had no idea, but like, so you spend like $140 for 5 hot dogs or something ridiculous like that. That adds up. So if you're doing that 3 times a day, you take a really expensive experience already and magnify it. The same thing with gifts. When we go to a trip, we tell the kids they're allowed to get 1 or maybe 2 souvenirs, depending on the length of the trip, or a cost limit. for each one. So it's not an every day they get something. It's they get one choice. So for instance, with Disney, when we went last time, we said we're going to get those at the last day. So throughout the parks, they're kind of looking and seeing what they want. And then maybe we let it go the fourth day or something we went where it's like, oh, this is the pin I really want. Like, got it. Totally good. Oh, this is the watch I want. These little $20 watches there. Got it. That's yours. Or a plush animal. But that's their choice, and they know they've got one or a limit of spending. Now you might think, oh, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Like, this is not the once-in-a-lifetime experience. Like, it might be for a period of time, but there's going to be other parks, other zoos, other events, other gifts. So don't overstate what the experience is. Oh, it's important. But I'll tell you, many times, like my kids, we've been to Disney twice with them, technically 3, right? Because we brought them.
Yeah, when Joshua was little,
Real little.
but that they can remember as kind of grown children twice, 2 big trips.
And we lived on the East Coast. It was drivable. So what's funny though, if you go and ask any of my kids right now, what do you remember about the first trip to Disney? And I thought like, oh my gosh, it's the only time we're going to go. I didn't even imagine we'd go the next year again. Like, and they go, oh, I don't remember anything about Disney, but do you remember the pool at the hotel? Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, the pool hotel. And the same thing with some of these events. We've gone up to the mountains here in Colorado and we've stayed at a few places and I'll go, oh, do you remember the hike we did? No, but I do remember the pool at the hotel.
They always remember the
breakfast.
Pool.
And I'm like, why do we even go anyplace? And so what we realized at one point is that the kids really only care about the hotel and the pool. And so we'll find hotels with a pool and they're ecstatic. Like they don't even care where it is. It could be like 10 minutes down the road. Mm-hmm. And so we've done that quite a bit for staycations and that is crazy cheap. Like if you know that your kids really just are at the age where they want a really sweet pool, you can go spend $200 on a sweet weekend, and they'll be ecstatic and save the $3,000 or $4,000 you'd spend at a park.
And I think part of this is really, and we talked about this in a previous podcast when we were talking about how trips were getting canceled and people were upset and kind of grieving that. And Jim made this great point about what are you trying to gain with this travel, with this experience, with this vacation? And a lot of times it's just connection. And I think our kids honestly remember the pool and the hotel most because that's when we're all connecting. That's when, Jim's throwing them in the pool and they're taking the GoPro under the water and we're all just focused on each other. It's not dragging them through museums or on these occasions and in the hot sun or walking, or they love when we are just focused on them. So I think that's why pizza at the pool is one of their favorite things. So thinking back, when you're budgeting for these trips, whether it's you and a partner or you and a family, I think, what am I really trying to gain from this trip? Maybe it really is seeing the Grand Canyon or going to art museums and it's really about the place, or is it really about the people? And if it's about the people, making sure that you're not over programming where you're not spending time with each other, you're just hustling and bustling to get from one thing to the other, really thinking, what is the outcome I want from this travel? And then pre-planning it backwards for your budget and budgeting your time while you're there.
Yep. And I will tell you this, after a great trip, that's the peak experience. There's always the down, the valley. Like, oh, remember how fun it was? And what you don't want to do is get to that valley after and get a bill that you haven't pre-planned or prepaid, because it makes it even worse. This is why so many people feel like they're in the doldrums of life in February, because Christmas is over or the holidays are over and they get the bills from Visa. And Visa shows up and you're already like, oh, the holidays are over, it's winter. And you get kind of this seasonal depression that comes up because all of a sudden you're hit with the bill. By pre-planning, pre-saving as much as you can, you avoid that valley experience. You still will maybe have some, you're like, oh, I wish I could go back kind of feelings, but you miss that like slap across the face that comes from Visa or whatever your credit card of choice is. So the thing we really talked about is, what do you want? Why are you doing this trip? Pre-plan the amount of money you want to spend. Make choices around how you're going to do day to day. I'm not saying every moment of the day, but make those choices. We're going to eat out twice or once a day. We're going to have one gift per day. And then try to stick to your boundaries in that time and realize you're going to have a much better experience at the end.
I love it. So, and it makes me want to go plan a trip.
Me too, which we can't do till the lockdown's over. So we do need some more questions. We want to thank you for listening. Where should they submit questions?
They can go to the justaskpodcast.com.
Great. And we just want to thank you for spending some time with us and hope you stay in touch. Bye.
Bye.